Music Theory 3. This is part 2 of our Introduction to Common Chord Modulations, and here we are in the textbook. This is page 302, starting on the common chord modulation. So we talked a lot about key relationships in our previous video, and I gave an example of a modulation that's a common chord modulation we're going to look at right at the end of this video. So I want to kind of detail what it would look like to do an analysis with a common chord modulation. Here's the whole idea. Most, like it says, most modulations are smoother by using some common element and usually common harmony to transition smoothly between the two keys that we're, the key that we're coming from and the key that we're modulating to. And so, like it says in the book, common chord sort of serves as a pivot or as a way to get into our new key without completely disrupting our line. There are other ways of transitioning into new keys. Some are more abrupt and some are less abrupt. Some help facilitate modulation between two keys that are more distantly related. In this case, common chord modulations typically facilitate a modulation or a transition between more closely related keys. Those are relative keys and closely related keys. It can be done with more distantly related keys, but it does require some chromaticism. Okay, so here's the idea behind a common chord modulation. I talked a little bit last time about closely related keys and how closely related keys, for instance, down here, have pitches in common as well as chords in common. So let's look at the two keys here. So say we're modulating from B flat to F major. Our first key is B flat, and we share that in common with F. And in B flat major, a B flat major chord is 1, and in F major it's 4. We also share D minor chord, 3 in B flat, 6 in F. We share a 5 chord in B flat that's also a 1 chord in F, right? So you can see all the commonalities between. So this gives the composer options and some avenues for smoothly transitioning into a new key. And this is kind of how it will look. This diagram is nice because we can be floating in, let's say we could be floating in B flat major. Right, so I can make a transition there to F major. You heard at the end, I transitioned there. And so one way this might happen, let's use some of the chords I was just using. Let's say we start in B flat major, and we have a 1 chord, and we have a 4 chord, we have a 2 chord, and we have a 5 chord, and then we have a 1 chord, right? And then we all of a sudden use this 1 chord, which is B flat major triad, to now help us shift over to F major. Now in F major, B flat major is a 4 chord, and we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. And then I can go 2 and 5 and 1, and I have a cadence in the new key. So listen to that again. Here's a 1 chord, 4, 2, 5, and 1. But now 1 is 1 in B flat, but it's also 4 in my new key of F. 2, 5, 1. And now I'm in a new key. So you can see how this chord right here, otherwise known as our common chord, helped us smoothly transition between the two keys. And I can use this chord, or our composer can use this chord, because it's held in common between our two keys. Let's look at some more examples of this. Okay, so here's something in B flat that starts in B flat major and ends in C minor. So here's B flat. Clearly we have a cadence, a confirming cadence, and as we'll see, that'll be very important in the new key of C minor. 5, 1, right? Or what we can indicate as a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C minor. So what's our common chord? Well, it's right here, between the two keys. The first thing I would do is I would say, hey, look at what's going on with this chord. First label its lead sheet symbol. So this is a C minor triad in first position. So we can see C minor / E flat, or we can just say C minor 6. And when we're analyzing, we have to consider, all right, what is this in my old key? Right? What is C minor in the old key? Well, in B flat major, C minor is a 2 chord, and it's labeled 2-6 here. What is C minor in my new key? Right? And in my new key, a C minor chord is a 1-6. So again, the quality and tonic and the root of the chord don't change. It just changes in how it functions and is labeled inside of our pivot or inside of our transition or modulation to the new key. I also want you to notice something else about where we arrived. Look right here, what happens right after that common chord modulation. We start to see accidentals that belong to our new key. That's going to be important. We call this the point of modulation, or as I like to say, the palm. This is where we, in fact, are not in Kansas anymore, if you watch The Wizard of Oz, right? We're no longer in our original key of B flat major, right? We've left that key. We now have a leading tone in C minor, right? And we have A flat, which is scale degree 6 in C minor, and then we have the presence of another leading tone in C minor. So we have pitches that are indicating to us that we're in a new key, point of modulation. We also have a confirming cadence here, right? So let's look at another one and see if we can find those same things going on. So here's another common chord modulation. And it starts in C major. What's going on here. We're given fewer notes here, but I think we can still kind of figure out what's going on here. Look at the end of this passage. What do we have? 5, 7, 1. And what key are we in? Well, we have the addition of this guy right there, the F sharp. It looks to me, if I'm looking at my bass notes, D, G, if we're saying 5, 1, then it looks to me like we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major. And they've labeled that for us. They've highlighted the common chord as well. I want you to pay attention again to what's going on right after our common chord. We start to have some accidentals that are indicating a new key. Now the G sharp is a little bit of a red herring. It's a secondary leading tone, but the F sharp is very important. Right? The F sharp is actually our new leading tone, right? And we'll have leading tones, we'll have lots of other things, but we want to use all parts of the score to help us label. Here's our point of modulation right here. This is where we're definitely headed towards the key of G major, right? We have the addition of that F sharp. And notice previous to it is where our common chord modulation is going to happen. So the common chord between the two keys, 4 and 1, is a C major triad. And we only have C and E here, but C major in the key of C major is 1. C major in the key of G major is 4. And you can see how they've labeled it with brackets. So again, some important components that I'm looking at here. A, let me find that confirming cadence to know for in fact we've moved to a new key. Remember, as I said before, 5-1 or a perfect authentic cadence or an authentic cadence is a really good indication that we've moved to a different key. We're not just tonicizing, we've confirmed a key at the end of a phrase with a cadence, okay? So that's sort of the stamp, that's the DNA of a new key, the fingerprint, however you want to say it. Then we backtrack and we kind of find where the point of modulation is. Where are we actually in our new key? And then typically, just preceding that will be our common chord or our transition between the new keys. Some other textbooks call it the pivot chord. Okay, let's look at one more example. And actually, I'm not going to look at any more examples in the book. I want to go over to this one, and I want to talk about this modulation. But first, let's go over to your worksheet, and let's just kind of finish out what we had started over here. So steps for confirming a common chord modulation. Use these steps when you're going through. First, is there a modulation? Remember our key hierarchy, or our modulation hierarchy, key relation hierarchy? The first thing you have to say is, do I actually have a modulation? Do I have a tonic pitch that's changing, right? Or is it just a tonicization, right? If you can skip those first two in your key relation hierarchy, non-modulation and tonicization, then you know you have a cadence. The second thing to do is to find that confirming cadence. So what does this mean? When you are analyzing something that has a modulation, you cannot start by labeling Roman numerals and just going through chord by chord. That will absolutely not work. And I know some of you are going to fall into this trap, so I'm saying it in the video right now, and I'll know if you've watched, if you can say this when we meet for class. You must first listen at least twice to the excerpt, find a cadence, and then you can backtrack to find the point of modulation. Okay? So find the confirming cadence. Often it's some sort of imperfect or perfect authentic cadence, but not always. Usually 5-1. Usually. Okay? Then, after you've done that, you want to find the point of modulation, right? And this is the point where we are, in fact, in the new key. So indications of this will be accidentals, which will include a loss of our old tonic pitch, gaining of a new leading tone, loss of our old leading tone, right? Gaining of new tonic pitch, gaining of notes that belong to our new key. So any of those types of accidentals. Usually a leading tone is a really, really, really good indicator that we are moving into a new key, right? So look for that. Once you find your point of modulation, the chord immediately preceding your point of modulation is usually your common chord. I'm sorry, I'm not writing this very well. But the chord that immediately precedes your point of modulation is usually your common chord. So we've seen that in all the examples, right? We had our common chord modulation, we found the point of modulation right after, and then of course we had already found our cadence. This is the order in which I would do it. Listen to the excerpt. Find a confirming cadence, right? Figure out what your first original key is. Find a confirming cadence in a new key. Figure out where your point of modulation is, right? Backtrack from that. Find your point of modulation. And then the chord immediately preceding that point of modulation will be your common chord between the old key and the new key. Typically speaking, you'll use this type of bracket to indicate the transition between the two. So say this is our new key here. We'll have a colon, and we'll have a Roman numeral up here, 1, and a Roman numeral in the new key. And these should equal the same chord, right? Okay, so let's go over and look at this block again. I'm not going to analyze every chord. We're just going to do the big picture. We're going to follow those steps. Still in C minor, perfect authentic cadence there. You hear something happen here, and if I were you, I would star that area. Okay, first step. Is there a modulation? Yes. It sounds like it. It looks like it. I think there's a modulation. Okay, can we confirm it with some sort of cadence at the end? Well, we know we start in C minor, and here it looks pretty clearly like we have a cadence in E flat major. It'll be important for you to be able to find cadences quickly here. Perfect authentic cadence in E flat major. Okay, we have a 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, right? And we even have a minor 2-6-5 before it, so we have predominant, dominant, and a very strong dominant, and a cadential 6-4 moving to a 1 chord. Definitely a confirming cadence in E flat major. Where do we start to have notes that belong to E flat major and that don't belong to C minor? Well, let me point you back over here, and I think we kind of heard something going on over here. I want to point your attention to a very specific note, and that is this note right there. What note is this? Well, hopefully you said it was a B flat. Why is it likely that we've moved keys if we're now using a B flat instead of a, say, B natural? And here's another B flat, here's another B flat, and B flat. Why is B flat so important to the key of C minor? Well, B natural is the leading tone of C minor. So if we no longer have B natural, then it can go to say that we are no longer in C minor. So the gaining of B flat, the loss of B natural, means that we're now moving into a new key. So this point right here, where we now start using B flats instead of B naturals, would be our point of modulation. So we'll label this our palm, right? And as I said, this is step number 3, right? Find the point of modulation. And again, that's loss of leading tone, gaining of new pitches, and that's consistent all the way through the end of the phrase here, right? We keep that B flat. We don't switch back at all. Of course, A flat is the key. And we are in C minor here, even though it doesn't indicate that we have moved from a different key. Regardless, we want to go to the preceding chord, and this, in fact, will be our common chord. So we know, we already confirmed through a cadence that we're moving to E flat, so we know our new key. What is this chord right here? C, E flat, G is a C minor chord, and we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is that in the old key? And in the old key, a C minor triad would be minor 1. What is that new key? C minor would be what chord in E flat major? That would be a 6 chord. And there you have it. You've just analyzed your first common chord modulation. From here, then you could go back to the beginning and start analyzing each of your harmonies. But the first thing you need to do is figure out where your common chord modulation happens, label that, and then the rest of your Roman numerals should easily fall into place. All right, we'll do some more examples in class, but I want to limit the video till here. You have one example you'll be doing in your homework, or 1 or 2 examples. I think 1 example you'll be doing in your homework. But that's it. One more thing to point out before we're done. There is an example that you'll be doing in your workbook that looks something like this, B here. And basically, you're given a key that starts, and then you're given a common chord, but you need to fill in the key here, right? Okay, so the easiest way to do this is B flat major, a 6 chord, and B flat major is G, B flat, and D. And so you have to think G minor chord would be 2 chord in what key? And if you think about it, that would be the key of F major. So we're modulating from B flat major to F major using this common chord between the 2 keys, G minor triad. F sharp. 4 chord in F sharp is B, D, F sharp. What would B minor chord be the 2 chord of? And if you said A major, you are correct. And you'll just continue in this fashion, seeing the key relationships and finding what the common chord modulation is between the 2. All right, good luck on your homework. Let me know if you have any questions.